Hey everybody, this is a late night live stream. It started because early this morning, or really yesterday morning, a long-time Zenny62 viewer named Fred Gates messaged me out of the blue, and I hadn't heard from him in quite some time. And he put it like this. He said, uh, um, oh, right here. He says, I wanted to hear your take on how you think the Raiders organization handled the firing of Antonio Pierce. And I wrote, okay, how are you doing? And then he wrote, do you think they had done him wrong and should have given him a fair chance? And he said, oh man, I'm doing fine. And I said, thank you. He said, thanks, how are you? And I said, I think it was just his time because his voice was being tuned out by the players, right? And he was throwing the players under the bus. Coach Pierce would do things like get to the podium and he would criticize a particular player rather than go back channel and talk to the player as if the player was, well, an adult, which is what the player is, and in private, as opposed to showing the person up on camera and creating this sort of imagined riff from a public standpoint, right? That's not something you do. But Coach Pierce started doing that, and I thought his stock really went down a lot among the locker room of men. Whereas the original presentation of the relationship between Coach Pierce and the Raider players was, hey, he's got our back. He's going to treat us like a man. He's going to talk with us. And part of that came off. And I think it had to do with just simply not realizing wins. Folks are funny under pressures like that. What I'm talking about is the relationship wasn't translating the wins. At one point, it was first, right? But next year, something else too, as I point out to Fred, the Raiders added too many cooks in the kitchen. They had Marvin Lewis as a senior offensive assistant and consultant. They had Tom Coughlin, same one. And both of those guys have, let's face it, Super Bowl trophies, no question about it. But when you're raising a young person in management, you want them to feel like they're not using training wheels, which is basically somebody else as a crutch, okay? And Mark Davis didn't do that with Mr. Daniels, with the coach, okay? Coach Pierce, I'm sorry, Coach Pierce. He didn't do that with Coach Pierce. I don't know where Daniels came to my head. He didn't do that with him. And I said I would vlog. I told Fred I'd vlog about what I'm talking to you about. And then I, out of this, I thought, well, you know what? I need to do a comprehensive review of who is being considered for head coach of the Raiders, because I've read accounts of others. Hondo Carpenter particularly stands out for a reason I'll mention in a few minutes. And I have found all of them lacking something. And I thought, what is this something? Well, this person mentions one set, this other person mentions the other. Why not just combine them all, since I know who they are and I've met a lot of them anyway? Jimmy Bosser writes, he says, when will the Raiders start winning? Well, Jimmy, I'll get to that in a second. But at any rate, Fred said, I said to Fred, that he keeps me on point. He said, I'll try. He said, that interview you did with your former boss, he's talking about L.U. Harris, is still one of my all-time favorite videos you've done. Oh, hey, did you ever get your ring after that video? I think I did, yeah. Well, hey, gotta run, take it easy, Zenny, okay? So, at any rate, this is that, okay? So, the bottom line here is, before I get to... I'm going to address this question front and center since you asked it right up front, okay? When will the Raiders start winning? The Raiders will start winning when they have a coach who not only wins the locker room, but understands X's and O's, of type that you can point to. For example, my favorite coach of all time is, well, two: Tom Landry and Bill Walsh, because they're known for innovation. Tom Landry, of course, multiple offense and flex defense. Bill Walsh, of course, the short passing game and the precision-ordered passing game that has come to be part of our society and recited all the time in progressions and checkdowns, right? Those came from the Bill Walsh offense. So those are my two favorites. But today, I have to say that I like what Bill Belichick has done with the Patriots. It took me a long time to figure out that it was subversively technical. What do I mean by that? Bill Belichick ushered in the era of the tailored offense with respect to data. They studied your defense. And so they're going to change their offense chameleon-like into something that can beat your defense, okay? If you really start thinking about that, it says, well, what do you stand for? Well, I stand for changing to beat you. Well, from a personnel standpoint, that can be pretty hard because let's say you've got power. Let's say you're the new coach and you look at your personnel and you've got offensive linemen that are 6'6", 6'7", 350. They don't run fast, but boy, they can really mow the lawn, right? So if you're trying to fashion an offensive answer to a particular defense that opponent's facing, and you believe the best answer is something that has to do with, say, the sweep, right? Where they're with pulling guards. Well, guess what? The personnel that you've been handed are not those people to solve that problem. So you've got to figure out another solution within the personnel you've got. So ultimately, you wind up marrying yourself to a particular philosophy because of the people you've got to work with. Now, if you can't work with them, you're a waste of time to everybody. You're a waste of time to the fans who want to win now, to the ownership who want the same thing, to the people who rely on the money in their pocket by success, right? And yet you're saying, well, we don't have these, we'll wait till the draft and we will build through free agency and wait till next year. That was okay in the past. Today, you have too many instances, too many examples, like look at the Broncos with Sean Payton, of a win-now attitude. Hey, we brought you in. With Sean, in fairness to Sean, this is what his third year with them, right? But he got Bo Nix, and immediately, first year out with a rookie, all the way out of the playoffs now, they were 10 wins and 7 losses, and they got in the wild card round. Boom. Or look at Jaden Daniels and the Washington Commanders, which, a team with a experience, but still in this organization, first year head coach, and that's the great Dan Quinn. I say the great because I had a pleasure to get to know the man. He's a straight up, honest person that anyone would want to work with or call a friend. At any rate, my point is that now we have a number of examples of success first year out. Not quite a Super Bowl yet, but we have those trains on the track to where we can say one day it's going to happen where you bring in a head coach. Actually, it did happen one year. John Gruden, right? The first year that John Gruden came to the Raiders, that was 2002, and he guided the Buccaneers to the 2003 Super Bowl against his old Raider team. Okay, and he was traded. All right, it was a trade that Al Davis consummated that sent John Gruden from the Raiders to the Buccaneers, and the Raiders ended up paying for it in a Super Bowl loss. But there is the one example. All right, but what happened after that was the team got used to John's voice, and it went out. Hey, good morning, it's me. How you doing? All right. So let me show you the list of people that I have formed here. Right here. There it is. And some of them are rumored. Others are very real. So let's just start from the top. Joe Brady is currently the offensive coordinator. I'm going to highlight this so you can read it. He's currently the Bills' offensive coordinator. He was a person whose claim to fame really started when he was offensive coordinator at LSU, and he was minding the passing business of a young man named Joe Burrow, who then, of course, was drafted by the Cincinnati Bengals. Recently, Joe Brady is known for taking over offensive coordinator duties from Ken Dorsey and improving the Bills' offense to where they discovered the beauty of a running quarterback, and they made Josh Allen that Lamar Jackson-like figure that is an MVP candidate right now. I say Lamar Jackson-like figure because Joe Brady discovered, hey, I've got a guy who's big and fast, and why don't I have him run, not just throw? Who knew? And that was the biggest difference in the Bills of today versus the Bills when Ken Dorsey was the offensive coordinator last year. When Dorsey got fired last year, the year before last year. He got fired in 2023 and then fired in 2024 after the Cleveland Browns. Joe Brady is known for using, I call them shake routes, zigzags. He and Bobby Slocum do this. The routes were, Bill Walsh popularized this, where they would call them shake routes, where you have the man in motion going up here and then coming back, okay? And, coming back. The idea is to, against the man for man, produce the outcome of no defender around the receiver wide open. Receiver catches the ball and then gains what we now popularly call yards after the catcher, yak, right? That's the idea. So Joe Brady is good at that. He's also good at, of course, developing running quarterbacks like Mr. Allen. And then we have, of course, the legendary Pete Carroll, one of my favorite people. Had a pleasure of interviewing him. You can see my interview here on Zenny62 YouTube at the NFL annual meeting in Orlando. It was Orlando. Actually, no, I was at the Biltmore in, I believe, 2018. So, Pete Carroll, what I love about Pete Carroll is when you sit down and talk with him, he makes you feel as if there's nobody else around. It's just you and him. His face is his body is toward you. His face is looking right at you. He's listening to what you say. He's not just saying things to you, right? Which is important, but he's listening to what you say. And that's a beautiful quality in leadership. You have to be willing to listen. And Pete Carroll is willing to listen to, an unknown like me, and yet as much as he's willing to listen to anybody else. That's the first thing that impressed me about Pete Carroll. So don't be surprised if I had to pick a couple of candidates that would be most likely to get the job. I would be hard-pressed not to consider Pete Carroll as one of them, because he's a very impressive person, period. And you can see why he's been successful at USC and why he was successful at Seattle and everything else. Then there's a man who I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet, but Liam Coen has had great success with the Buccaneers offense and with a guy named Baker Mayfield. And Liam has had this kind of, I thought, frankly, I kind of thought it was kind of a herky-jerky college experience coming through the SEC and everything. And I didn't, tie him. I like to tie people to innovation, things they've created, novel uses of approaches and everything else. And I didn't see him as that. But, I'm happy to say that I'm wrong, because I really started to look at what he did. It's how Liam puts together, I mentioned, for example, the jet sweep, or different types of formations, and so that he has enough of a mix to keep the defense really off balance. I mean, really off balance. So you would say, okay, he's a great offensive coordinator. What would make him as a great head coach? And I don't have anything to base that on. There's some people who believe that because you're a great offensive coordinator and you resurrected the career of Baker Mayfield, that automatically makes you a great head coach. Well, that's not true. Now, the organization could say, hey, look, we could take care of that another way. We can take care of that through, say, our defensive coordinator, who we might make assistant head coach. There are a lot of ways to deal with that, okay? So if they feel that developing a quarterback is really of the utmost importance, and the Raiders do feel that, then don't be surprised if Liam emerges as, if not head coaching candidate, then a candidate to be the offensive coordinator for the head coach that's selected, okay? Or both, all right? Don't be surprised there. I would be surprised if he emerged from this as head coach, to be honest with you. But he's getting looks. And today, now if you have in your mind that, oh, these guys are going to get on a plane and automatically meet with Mark Davis, no. This is the 21st century. This is 2025. People use Zoom and their equivalents, all right? So we can meet, you can be anywhere and I can meet you and vice versa, and we can have our interview. So at some point, yeah, you want to meet in person. But look, a lot more gets done because of the technology available today. It's a beautiful thing. Liam Coen. Now we also come to Brian Flores, the Vikings DC, and a man I consider a modern defensive genius along the lines of Tom Landry. Why? Because he literally created the modern version of the flex defense. He recognized that it was important to have a defense that changes with respect to the offensive keys. Let's take there's actually a famous example that's gone around where Flores had his middle linebacker sit down as if he's a lineman, but then when it was the Rams, when the Rams went to a particular pass play and the snap of the ball went this way, guess what? The middle linebacker went right to the flat and picked off the ball. Okay? That's what film study and computer analysis gets you, a specialized defense. That's also something that Brian Flores learned when he worked for Bill Belichick and the Patriots. He took the specialized offense and specialized defense, specialized defense, basically the one defense that fits your offense. I'm going to design the one defense that attacks you. Romeo Cornell was more famous for this when he was defensive coordinator for the Patriots and then, of course, later the Texans. But Romeo and New England and Bill Belichick, they would go back years to get defenses they never used before, all right? And they would say, hey, didn't this defense work against that particular offense? And next thing you know, you saw an exotic version of a Y tackle 6 that went all the way back to the Kansas City Chiefs and E.J. Hullum as linebacker. I'm not kidding you, okay? That's the kind of minds that were at work with the Patriots, and I want you to keep that in mind because I'm going to talk about that when I get to Mike Vrabel too, all right? So, Brian Flores, what happened with the Miami and Flores? He didn't have, in my view, the right offensive coordinator to complement his defense. Also, he is a very time on task, no joke, not really a backslapper kind of guy, and I know that personally because I tried to get an interview with him, and he said in a very stern, not stern against me personally. I didn't take it personally at all. This was at the NFL annual meeting in 2020. I was introduced to him by a sports agent, and he was making the rounds. But I wanted to get an interview with him, and he said, basically in a very stern way, not now. But it was a kind of a way that it was hard. It was kind of a hard one. It was kind of like my initial reaction was like, wow, and then I thought, well, I don't think he means it the way that I could easily have taken it. Okay, so I continued to root for him then. Of course, he had his legal problems and everything. I said 2020, actually, but that was 2019. But at any rate, it was also the year that I met Chris Mortensen. Well, actually, I didn't meet. I saw Chris Mortensen there, rest in peace. My friend who introduced me to Coach Flores also introduced me to Chris Mortensen, but I hadn't seen Chris in several years. I used to run into him in the bathroom of the Super Bowl for my first Super Bowl back in Tennessee. Actually, well, it was Tennessee Titans, but it was actually in Atlanta. That was 2000. Through San Diego, and then through Detroit. Yeah, I had a whole string of Super Bowls. We were running each other in the bathroom. He and Andy Rooney. Don't ask me why. Rest in peace to both of them. Funny guys. At any rate, Brian. That's how I met Brian Flores. But again, Brian Flores understands how to build the defense that will put the clamps on your offense. Can he be yet again a leader of men? My answer is yes to that. Absolutely. He needs the right offensive coordinator partner, like someone like Kliff Kingsbury, or a fellow that I got to know at the NFL Accelerator meeting in Atlanta in 2022, and that's Jeff Nixon. Jeff Nixon, if you know the name, he was defensive backs coach for the Panthers. He's got 25 years of experience, but most famously, he's the offensive coordinator at Syracuse and was responsible for that quarterback last year and that quarterback's record-setting year at Syracuse. Whereas the Syracuse quarterback, I believe, is going to enter the NFL draft. That's all due to Jeff Nixon. Jeff Nixon should have a job in the NFL. He should be considered for offensive coordinator someplace, and if not, get some head coaching looks just because of the amount of years he's had. Now, will he pop up on this list right now? No, he won't. He's firmly there at Syracuse. He's doing a great job. Not to say that somebody won't pluck him soon, especially if he keeps producing quarterbacks that do what the last quarterback did, right? Keep out for that name, Jeff Nixon. Yeah, just like President Nixon, all right? Now we come to Aaron. So that's Brian Flores, who should hire Jeff Nixon if he gets a head coaching job. But here's Eric Glenn, the Lions defensive coordinator. What makes Aaron Glenn work? Aaron Glenn has the gift of understanding how to get the right personnel into the right place, even if that happens to be low end on the totem pole because your main killers are all injured. That is what he's done with the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions, over the past 2 years, have been decimated with injuries at various times, but they've still managed to post a top 10 defense no matter who is available. That means you've got a person in Coach Glenn who understands how to make a great meal, if you will, of the personnel he has available. And you say, how does that translate to be a head coach? Easy. A head coach has to understand as an administrator who's available, how to use who is available, how to explain to their offensive assistants how to craft a game plan to use them, and then make those plans happen, and then achieve success, which is wins, right? And playoff victories and eventually Super Bowls, okay? Aaron Glenn has the ability to do that. Now, you would say, okay, well, where's his Super Bowl ring? And my answer would be, well, let's see what happens this time, because they're about to get an ultimate test. The Washington Commanders are coming to Ford Field, and brother, unless Aaron Glenn pulls out some special defense that the Lions, that the Commanders haven't seen, I don't know. Now, you would say, Zinni, you were kind of hemming and hawing. What defense would that be? I think, frankly speaking, if it were me, I would use a hybrid 3-4. Yeah, an old-fashioned Denver Broncos style, Randy Gradishar guided 3-4 defense that was installed by the Broncos and used to great success in 1979, that had 3 down linemen, the two linebackers, but the nose tackle was assigned what we now call two gapping, and the ends did a great job of maneuvering the area between the guard and the tackle. Okay, and the purpose of this is you're dealing with a running quarterback, but you're also dealing with a team that does the edge, that does the offensive tackle runs well. Sometimes you want to surprise them with something that they haven't seen in a while. And as simple as it sounds, a lot of people have forgotten really how to play offense against a three-man front of the kind that I'm talking about. Now, in college, there's a different style of three-man front, but the ends really crashing inside or placed there prematurely. But what happens is that style is weak around the edges. Don't use it, all right? So someone like Jalen Daniels will eat you alive. Don't use it. My point is, though, that if Glenn comes out with something like that, and then you start mixing in the different blitzes from the four linebackers, it could be a long day for the Commanders. All right, a very long day. Now, will he use it or not? Well, that's why they play the game, and we want to watch. We want to find out, right? But Glenn, if there's anybody that can put together that kind of specialized personnel grouping to stop an offense, it's Aaron Glenn. So let's see what happens. Now we come to my friend John Gruden, the former Raider head coach. A number of people have said that they expect the Raiders to interview him yet again. I would be very excited to see John Gruden back on the sidelines. The question is, the degree to which the Raiders want him. John Gruden is a football junkie. There's no question in my mind that he is aware of the latest approaches. He probably has a book somewhere in his office to answer those, and he's just chomping at the bit to get in there again. My only truck about the coach, okay, is Coach Gruden, and I'm just going to say this straight out, has got to get a more diverse set of friends around him. Like when you have watched Barstool, frankly speaking, John, it's all white guys, and there are people watching that now, and it's going to affect whether or not you get hired today. I don't care what people tell you on the other back end, but the NFL today is different, and there's a little track record issue going against you. There are a lot of people who want to see you succeed, but you need to work on that. All right. So, but does John Gruden get more than a look-see? I think so. John Gruden will always be part of Raider lore. Now we come to another Bay Area favorite of mine. That's Pep Hamilton, most currently the DC Defenders head coach and general manager of the XFL. But see, I know Pep Hamilton because Pep Hamilton was offensive coordinator when David Shaw was the head coach at Stanford, and they developed Andrew Luck into the successful passer, and I would have to say a guy that gave us, my University of California Golden Bears, an occasional bellyache during his time. Although we did get him when Mike Muhammad intercepted that pass and brought it back for a touchdown. But at any rate, Pep Hamilton is also the popularizer. Well, no, he is the creator of a series of ways of describing the West Coast offense that you and I can grasp. For example, what's the basic philosophy of a play action pass with a fly pattern, and then tight end running a 12 yards and a hook, and then the halfback on a flare, what's called flare control? Well, he would say touchdown to check down, because it would be a play action. So by the time you finish the fake and you got back there, you're looking to throw deep, but if the keys are bringing you to where that pass isn't ready, you immediately check down. It was Pep Hamilton created the term touchdown to check down, and you'll hear it recited because I was also reciting of time. It's saying, hey, look, I recognize that you don't have a lot of time to throw the football. I want you to do this too. If you think about it this way, you don't wind up getting sacked with the ball in your hand. The ball's gone, right? Pep Hamilton created that. And it's no surprise that Pep Hamilton is the kind of person who's sought after for his consultant, coach, spokesperson. He was on the NFL Network recently. I believe he still has a contract with them. Pep Hamilton is intellectually sought after. Don't be surprised if he winds up, if not head coach, then something like assistant head coach, offensive coordinator, or title to that effect. And that brings us to Ben Johnson, the Lions offensive coordinator. Ben's rise has to do strictly with the success of the Lions offense and his success with Jared Goff. Beyond that, do I know that he can put together the right personnel groupings on offense? Yes, he can. Do I know that he can come up with novel schemes to embarrass defenses? Yes. He's one of the also popularizers of the shake routes that Bobby Slocum uses and Joe Brady, among others, okay? He's done a great job of that. He's also done a great job of producing tight formation passing concepts. I'm not a fan of tight formations myself. All right, I don't like them. I like to spread out Sid Gilman style. Sid Gilman was the coach of the San Diego Chargers, who really is the father of what we now call the air raid passing game, but was then just simply called the pro set passing game. And Sid Gilman's rule was, hey, look, I want my wide receivers are the widest out beyond the numbers because you're stretching the defense, okay? And then he wanted to use the offense to stretch the defense all over the place and figuratively create holes within which to throw into to receivers. That's a very simple way of describing the Sid Gilman approach. Al Davis was the assistant to Sid Gilman and borrowed Sid Gilman's ideas, but he added something called the slot formation and flooding zones, and flooding so that all receivers came out on one side of the ball. That's an Al Davis innovation. So at any rate, Ben Johnson, getting back to Ben Johnson, there's no one innovation you can point to for him, but it's really how he's employed the personnel that the Lions have. And he's the flavor of the month because of Lions' success. Will that translate to another team? You know, I have to be honest with you. I'm not convinced that it will. Okay? As head coach. It's one thing to be offensive coordinator. Now, if you're asking me, does it translate to another team if he's offensive coordinator, the answer is yeah. But head coach? No. Show me where he is going to make an offensive coordinator do that. Okay? It's not, I mean, let me give you an example. Tom Landry created the flex defense when he was not defensive coordinator for any other organization. When he was head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. You see what I'm getting at? In other words, he created tools to use to get his personnel in the right position as head coach, not as a coordinator. Okay? So Ben Johnson will come in, but as a head coach, is he capable of creating defensive tools and offensive tools, being that innovative, as opposed to borrowing what others have already created? I don't see that yet. Maybe. All I know is that he's done a great job with Jared Goff, go Bears, and the Lions may very well be the Super Bowl champions this year. Now, moving along in our list, and then I'll get into your comments, which are numerous. We have Kliff Kingsbury, Commanders offensive coordinator, and the Dr. Frankenstein of the success that is Jalen Daniels. I think Kliff Kingsbury deserves another shot at head coach, and he would be a fantastic guy with the Raiders. He has enough experience. He's learned a lot. He's proven his intellectual mettle this year as offensive coordinator with the Commanders under Dan Quinn. I see nothing that would stand in the way, in my opinion, of Kliff Kingsbury possibly being the Raiders head coach. Let's see what happens. But he should be on the short list. I'd be surprised if he wasn't. Really would be. We come to Byron Leftwich. I had the pleasure of meeting Byron Leftwich also at the NFL Minority Coaches Accelerator in 2022 in Atlanta. Byron is soft-spoken, not given to great commentary, but a person who really does a great job of teaching the Bill Walsh passing game. He's very well respected for being able to take his personal experience at quarterback and translate them for other quarterbacks. Now, again, and I say the same thing about Byron that I would say about Ben Johnson with respect to head coach. Does that necessarily translate into him being a great head coach? And the answer is, I don't know. But I believe he has enough experience to make a difference with your quarterback so that you would want to build a whole managerial team around him, maybe have your defensive coordinator as assistant head coach and so on. He is that talented a personality and person you want to listen to warrant that kind of team being built around him. Now, then we had to come to Todd Monken, the Ravens head coach. I put HC. It's not HC. It should be OC, offensive coordinator. Excuse me there. The Ravens offensive coordinator. And Todd is, I've always known Todd as an offensive coordinator. He was an offensive coordinator for Jameis Winston when Dirk Carter was the coach of the Bucs. My issues with Monken and Winston are not my issues anymore because Todd does a great job of finding the right tool. And I mean by that, I mean, do you use a rollout or trap plays or finding the right offensive play tools to use with personnel. He did that with Lamar Jackson in a virtuoso way. What I didn't like about how he handled Winston was that he put Jameis Winston in offenses that were interception prone by their design. They were not ball control, okay? And then he would turn around and blame Winston for something that really was his fault. And Jameis is only doing what Todd would tell him to do. That was my personal thing. But you can see by Tom Monken's success with Lamar Jackson, he's gotten over that. But does that translate to head coach? My answer again is I don't know. Do I want to build a team around Todd Monken? Personally, me, no. And that's just my sense, okay? It's nothing personal against him. But I was asked to render an opinion, and there's my opinion. I think Todd Monken is an outstanding offensive coordinator, but I don't think he's your best choice to be head coach, or should be. Now, we're out to Ron Rivera, Go Bears, former Commanders head coach, will be considered by the Raiders. Ron is an excellent leader, an excellent person. I met him very quiet, very soft-spoken. He's got a kind of sense of humor that kind of sneaks up on you. I think what he has to overcome is the feeling that with certain players he's a little too rigid. Now, if you feel that discipline is your problem, as has been the case with the Raiders, then Ron Rivera may very well be the choice you want. But if you're thinking about Rivera and saying, hey, wait a minute, he's not the first guy that I think of when I think of molding a quarterback, then don't go in that direction, okay? Ron Rivera has claimed the famous defense as a defensive coach. And so the Raiders with some other coach than Rivera's defensive coordinator, I think it would be a better combination myself. Rex Ryan, former Jets head coach, is really made it to the Jets by a number of people. I think Rex, again, this is a defense. What I love about Rex is his expertise at the four-man front defense and the unique exotic blitzes that he uses, and his brother, and the number of innovations that their father and they have brought into the league. So when I think of Rex Ryan, I think, hey, Rex, would you be my DC? Not so much my ace, my head coach, my defensive coordinator, because I want an innovative scheme guy there that can really knows how to find the right tools defensively to create that defense that we need to stop this opponent on this day and then that opponent on the other day. All right? And then we come to Deion Sanders, Colorado head coach. Deion Sanders said on Tamron Hall Friday of last week that coaching in the NFL was not something the Lord called him to do. He said that. Then all of a sudden, after he said that, my friend Benny Bonsiori of the Las Vegas Review-Journal puts out that, hey, a source says that Deion's interested in the job. Well, wait a minute. I've met Deion Sanders. I don't claim to know the man. But the one thing that I figured out about Deion by just observing him is if he wants you to know he wants something, he's not afraid to say it. He's not going to go through emissaries unless, of course, he's trying to simply keep his name out there and fresh so he can say to Colorado, hey, I'm still wanted out here. Maybe you should sign me to a bigger contract. Okay? And I think that's the only reason why Deion is allowing his name to be bandied back and forth like this. But I know, a number of people know, and he knows that he is committed to those kids at Colorado. That he cannot stand the idea of leaving them behind. Those who say, well, he wants to coach his kids at the Raiders, well, think about it. The Raiders don't have the number one pick. Either Travis Hunter or Shedeur Sanders is going 1 or 2. You and I both know it, absent some trade. The Raiders are not in a position to do that. They're way down the pipe at 6? So that's not happening. The only way it happens is if the Raiders turn around and make some type of deal that involves the Tennessee Titans. And look, I don't care what anybody says. The Titans are building a beautiful $2 billion stadium. And I would bet they want to usher in that new stadium with a new quarterback named Shedeur Sanders. Watch. That would leave Travis Hunter for the Browns. So I don't think that Deion is actually a coach candidate for the Raiders. I do think Deion Sanders will make an excellent head coach at some point, but he's got something going at Colorado that's special. You know it, I know it, he knows it, Colorado knows it. They just need to, form a package that makes him stop whispering, sweet nothings out there to some emissary and say, hey, look, say this, right? Just for PR purposes. Because as he said on Tamron Hall's show, he doesn't go to the living room of a parent or a kid. He does it through television. He uses the communication waves. So he's shaping a view that, hey, look, I'm still wanted out there. You can't just hold me to this. I'm still wanted out there, but I'll do right by the kids. Okay? And now we come to my favorite for the Raiders, David Shaw. Broncos personnel man, former Stanford head coach, builder of Andrew Luck and Stanford's success in the 21st century. He didn't have any success over the last 3 years at Stanford because, well, 2 words, transfer portal. But as a head coach, Coach Shaw knows enough innovative offense, novel approach. He has a fingertip feel for the right personnel placed in the right scheme at the right time to be a very successful, and I say very in italics, successful head coach. The Raiders, hey, he played wide receiver with the Niners. He was on the Raiders staff. His father, Willie Shaw, was defensive coordinator with John Gruden when John Gruden was first hired. He's got a lot of history with the Raiders. The Raiders would do very well hiring David Shaw as head coach. Will it happen? Let's see. I happen to think that he's a dark horse candidate. Then we come to Steve Spagnuolo, the Chiefs defensive coordinator. When I think of Spagnuolo, I think of the mastermind of defense. I don't think of head coach. Now, obviously he has other ideas. He can talk about his knowledge of personnel. He's been in the league a long time. He knows everybody. He knows every team. He knows every approach. He knows who's available, who's not. He has a tenure that's legendary. Now, but does that make him a person who at the next level of head coach would automatically cause a Super Bowl champion? And I would have to say that given his time with Andy Reid, the defenses he's put up to battle Andy Reid's offenses in practice, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a better candidate if you want a head coach that can get Super Bowls for you than Steve Spagnuolo, although I believe that David Shaw is equal to him. All right? Lastly, we have Mike Vrabel. Whoa, wait a minute. Mike Vrabel got hired by the Patriots. Not anymore. But I put it, we said, why do you leave him there? I left him there to make a point. Because there are people who are saying that the Patriots violated the Rooney Rule because they interviewed black coaches and then they hired Vrabel. All right? And I remind everybody this. First of all, the Patriots want people who practice the Patriot way. They brought in Jared Mayo for that reason. They were delighted that there was the additional plus that Jared's African American. But when he became head coach, he did not follow what I believe was the classic expression of the Patriot way, and that's molding your offense to the opponent's defense and coming up with novel approaches offensively and defensively. He put milquetoast offenses out there, defenses that were, you looked at them and thought, well, hey, that might be effective, and then it was effective. But offensively, nah, not at all. It was very disappointing. Very disappointing display. And I happen to believe also that they should not have drafted Drake May as the third pick. I don't believe Drake is that guy at that level. Drake May is good enough to be a coach killer. Good enough to start, but not good enough to win you that championship. Okay? And yet, they took Drake May. Think about this. The Patriots took Drake May over, because he was not, I said number two, he was number two, second, not three, over Jaden Daniels. All right? And the Commanders are only too happy to snap up Daniels in the draft this last year. I was there. Again, I repeat, the Patriots took Drake May over Jalen Daniels. Who does that, right? That sealed Jared's fate right there. Because who's to say, hey, look, if he had Jalen Daniels and made him a starter, that the Patriots would have wound up back in the playoffs and everyone would have been called Mr. Daniels the next Tom Brady. Could have happened. All right, so there's my my rundown. Good morning. And then ours is TB. Tom Brady is basically a Super Bowl team under Dungy. Okay, talking about Tampa Bay. Keep the lions out of your mouth, sir. That's very funny. Why isn't anyone considering Art Shell? Art Shell. Hey, Google. How old is Art Shell?
I don't know, but I found these results on search.
As my mom just said, too old. So there you go. Well said. Then Trojan Fight says, I wish it was Deion just to see all the temporary Colorado fans leave. He's talking about the bandwagoners. That's funny. And Edward Muska says, Gruden needs another crack at it. I agree. Hey, so folks, thanks a lot for stopping by. Please share this around. And by the way, if you're in California, and as my many gigantic portion of my friends, like maybe half, hang in there. It's going to get better. Live long and prosper. Good night, everybody. Thank you for watching. And hey, Fred Gates, there you go, my man. Let me know what you think. See y'all later. And I'll do a part 2. I'll do a follow-up too. See ya.